All right, we'll go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I just wanted to do is kind of have everybody introduce themselves. If you could give me your name and also your GitHub name so that I'm familiar with who you are in the community as well. And then your reasoning for wanting to join and be involved with this working group. So I think I see Chad Gary, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. If you want to introduce yourself first.
Yeah, sure. Yep, I'm Chad Geary. You got it right. I'm a Linux systems administrator full time, and I work for a local municipal entity. I don't have much on GitHub, but my username is Chad Geary, no spaces. I think you've got it actually. But the reason for joining, we use Salt. I've used it at different organizations. At my previous organization, I use it at my current organization. I'm the biggest proponent in my organization as far as I'm aware, and just really trying to get knee deep in Salt and improve it along the way if I can.
Is there any interest you have particularly in SSH?
I wouldn't say particularly. It's possible something will come up that sparks my interest, but just improving it, getting to know it better, using it more often. We use the SSH component quite a bit, but I'm sure we could do more with it.
Perfect. All right, great, thanks. All right, so I'm probably going to say this wrong. Balvinder?
Yeah, hi, this is Balvinder this side, and my Git handle is Balrawat.
Can you spell it for me? I'm just trying to.
Yeah, BALRAWAT.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so I am working as an SRE, and I am working with Salt for all my infrastructure, configuration management mostly, and yeah, basically config management things. So we are not using Salt SSH as of now, but I think Salt SSH can help us avoid those Salt minion dying sometimes because they are up for a long time and we have upgraded things along the way. So it also helps because I am working partly on Ansible also. So I see SSH as type of Ansible thing. So that can help.
Cool, great. All right, so just so the other people here know, Tom, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tom. My GitHub handle is thatch45. I wrote Salt SSH and Salt and many other things a while back. I haven't been heavily involved in code in Salt for the last few years, but definitely want to be involved in making sure that we can move forward on some good architecture.
Great, thanks. All right, Gareth.
So I'm Gareth, also work at SaltStack. My GitHub is Gareth Greenaway. I'm just, interested in what the working group is going to work on. Just mostly joined to observe and just listen. Interested in what direction Salt SSH goes in.
Cool. All right, Wayne.
Yeah, I'm Wayne Werner. My GitHub handle is Wayne W. Some people might think it's Wayne, but it's Wayne W. I also work here at SaltStack. SSH is just an interesting protocol to me, and I really enjoy just kind of anything that involves it. So mostly, again, I'm here like Gareth to kind of see where things are heading, but something that is particularly interesting to me or I've got some expertise in, I'm definitely happy to lend a hand and sharing of my knowledge and or experience.
Great. All right, looks like Kavya just joined. If you could just give yourself a bit of an introduction so everybody knows who you are in the room.
Yeah, sure. I'm Kavya. I'm the product manager of the Open team. And I'm here to facilitate basically I'm here for anything that the working groups wants me for. I usually manage some of the logistical aspects of the working group, as well as I'm also kind of like interested in seeing what the working groups are putting together and how we can help more kind of like strategically as well. So for both of those, I mean, strategical as well as logistical aspects, I'm here to help the team. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Yeah, and so my name's Megan Wilhite. My GitHub handle is shell ch3ll. And no, it's not short for Michelle. It's a video game reference. Yeah, so I'm just going to be helping lead the SSH team here. So I think that's everybody, unless I missed anybody. I think that's everybody. And so let's go ahead and get started. So for this meeting, I was just hoping to establish some of the goals that we want to accomplish. To make it clear, this team will, the goals will be for the sodium release, which is slated for about 6 months, if not more. So we have to keep that in mind when we're establishing our goals in terms of how much time we have to achieve everything. And so to get started, let me see if I can share my screen and I can kind of show you guys what goals I had in mind. And then I was hoping to bring it to the room to see if anybody had any further ideas that we could try to tackle this release. So 1 second here. Okay. Can you see my screen and it says step 8?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so one of the big goals that we'll need to accomplish for the sodium release is in the sodium release, we're planning on only supporting Python 3. And so in terms of Salt SSH, this is going to be a pretty big task to make sure that it works across OSs that only have Python 2 installed, for example. I do have this salt enhancement proposal, and if everybody could go and read that when you have some time, and add any comments or ideas that you have about that, I'd greatly appreciate that. But that is definitely going to be one of the big goals to tackle. And there's a lot of different parts to this step, so I was hoping to create a couple of issues that we can assign out. I don't know if anybody is interested in tackling this together, but it's something I could definitely be itemized. Let me show you here just 1 second. Just an overall kind of the idea is that by default, if the Python versions match or running against Python 3, it'll continue to use that. We're also going to add a Salt SSH config option so that a user can run a raw command or a script against the host, so that if they want to install Python 3 before it copies over the tarball and runs the command, they can do that. We're also going to update the current SSH ext alternatives feature to automatically find the necessary Python libraries. Right now you have to set them in a configuration file. And the other option will be, we'll maintain and build a Python 3 binary that users can copy over that will be used with the salt call command. So we could definitely, I plan on creating issues for those. And if anybody has any interest, we can definitely assign those out. I plan on just creating the issues in the community repo and same with anything else that we try to tackle in this group as well. So that's the big one that I see for this release. The other thing that I thought might be useful is I went ahead and I looked through all of the issues we have that are tagged SSH, and I went and saw, you know, what was like a bit of a higher priority and things that we might want to tackle. And depending on how many people we have that are willing to help, I thought it would also be a good idea to tackle some of these issues. I'll go ahead and share it in the SSH Slack channel, so anybody can take a look at that. But yeah, so those are the key things that I have that I wanted to tackle for this release. So yeah, I just want to bring it open to the room if anybody has any other ideas. Even if it's not something we can tackle this time around, we can add it so that the next group can maybe tackle it in the next release.
Making the primary goals that you've got here make a lot of sense.
Okay.
I mean, this is addressing the main liabilities that we're looking at. Now, part of some of the things that we had discussed a while ago, I mean, months and months ago, were kind of aspirational around some of the longer term ideas. I mean, some of the challenges that we have from a Salt SSH perspective is I feel that it is tied directly into Salt. I think it makes sense as being a standalone application. And we did talk about that a little bit in the past. I mean, so far as to fork Salt SSH out of Salt, give it a fresh name and a fresh brand, right? And in what you're talking about here, it's interesting because the Python 3 only shift is a big deal. And it enables a lot of change as far as Salt SSH is concerned. The other thing is that when we look at how long it takes to test Salt SSH, it's a fairly legitimate liability inside of Salt right now. And so I guess I'm wondering if we kind of step back from a Salt SSH perspective, and we said, what would it look like if we were to pull this code out, put it in a standalone repo, really give it its own long-term goal? I think that would help the Salt project significantly, because I think that it would lower a lot of the actual liability that we have to deal with in there, and I think it would help Salt SSH a lot. And I think that the whole migration to Python 3 is a really good opportunity in general, because, like you were saying, I mean, there's the problems around dealing with Python 2 and Python 3 moving forward as Python 2 dies at the end of the year. I mean, that's issuing some pretty serious issues. The other challenge that we run into there is Python 2, Python 3. Another one of the challenges, or one of the interesting things that we see here, is that when we talk about being able to run Salt SSH with Python 2 on target systems, we're generally talking about older Red Hat systems. We're talking about RHEL 6, CentOS 6, and 7. So I guess 8 is out. I can no longer say that all versions of Red Hat Linux are older versions of Red Hat Linux. They took a long time to get 8 out. So it just makes me wonder about some things there. So if we were to step back and ask ourselves, what would it look like in a sodium time frame, right? To pull Salt SSH out of Salt. So one of the, if we carve that up, what we're looking at is that we've got the thin system. Salt SSH relies heavily on the thin system, and the thin system inside of Salt is actually used at this point by a number of other components of Salt. So for instance, the Docker command and control overlay system uses thins. So I mean, if we start to carve this up, it would make sense to be able to say something like, maybe we leave thin inside of Salt, because generating a thin is really relative to creating that portable Salt environment. I think it makes sense to still be inside of Salt. If we look at Salt SSH functionality in and of itself, if we were able to move that functionality over to a Python 3 environment, have full use of async IO, and then we also have the question of, if we move that over to an async IO environment or a Python 3 environment, could we start to separate the Salt SSH functionality itself from being so tightly coupled to relying on Salt? So let me see if I can, and I'm just spitballing here, right? I'm just throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. So don't take my words with a grain of salt. But so let's say that we shift how we look at Salt SSH to be more along the lines of, we create a thin, and that thin is the deployment system that goes out there, but that the orchestration and everything exists in its own, really in its own right. The upshot there is that we can get a really clean separation. We could probably use the POP system to create this new Salt SSH. We could almost certainly, goodness, we should be able to make it a lot faster. And we should be able to parallelize better. I mean, there are a number of ways in which we do parallelization inside of Salt SSH that I think could be heavily optimized with newer async techniques. So for instance, we right now inside of Salt SSH, we're shelling out to SSH. And I still think that that's frankly a really good way to go. But if we but when we shell out to SSH, how Salt SSH works is it uses the multiprocessing library inside of Python to make a process, which then shepherds the SSH connection to a specific target system. And everything that's happening in that process is purely based on IO wait. That could easily be abstracted into a coroutine. If we were able to abstract that into a coroutine, then that would lower our overall memory footprint of Salt SSH by, and I'll be a little hyperbolic in my number, but it might be as much as 90 to 95%, which should logically facilitate the ability to expand out the parallel connection nature of Salt SSH significantly, again, making it a lot faster. I don't think that we could get it to like Salt native speeds, but I do think that we could get Salt SSH's architecture with certain refinements to be just a lot faster. And then we have the problem of integrating some of the functionality that exists inside of Salt, like the mine and the peer systems, as well as the execution wrapper layers. The wrapper layers and these other components are things that, if we were to build a new system using POP, then what we would end up with is, and for those of you who aren't familiar with POP, it's out on GitHub under saltstack/pop. It's fairly new. Well, it's newly released. I've been working on it slowly and researching around it for the last 2 or 3 years, but it's really the 6th iteration of the Salt loader system and the Salt plugin system. So it's a really aggressive evolution of that. But I guess what I'm saying in a nutshell is, I think that even if we made a standalone project, a significant portion of that code is probably portable. there are new techniques that we could put in place. And so, I mean, now that we're here talking about it, Megan, let me kind of propose this. You've got a really good outline for the Python 2 and 3 migration, having a 2 compatible thin and every, you know, I'd need to read it again. I have read it. It's just been like 6 weeks. Sorry. Like it's in there, but I need to dig a little. And that also gives us a really good framing around how to make that evolution. And so here's what I would like to do. I think that since we're still a little ways away from forking, since we're still a little ways away from setting the neon branch, I mean, we're close, right?
We just set the neon branch, so everything going and developed is sodium.
Oh, you're so fantastic. Okay. I'm so sorry that I didn't see that happen.
You're good. It just recently happened.
Anyway, I think it would make a lot of sense if, so what I want to do is I'm going to start working on a prototype for an isolated Salt SSH. If anybody has any ideas for names, then let me know. We could name it faster than Ansidum. But so yeah, this is what I'm going to do is that for the time being, let's still plan on these changes going directly into Salt for the sodium release. I'm going to start working on a separate prototype. If we can get that prototype working before the sodium branch, well, okay. Assuming that we can get this prototype working well in the next month or so, then I would say that for sodium, we place a deprecation on Salt SSH. We would still ship Salt SSH in sodium. We would still fulfill the goals that you're talking about, Megan. But as we fulfill those goals, we also make sure that those fixes and the mindset for those fixes go into the new thing. And again, I mean, we're talking about this publicly in this meeting. This is aspirational. Like, don't get me wrong. Nanotube. So I guess what I'm saying is, Megan, your roadmap is good. Let's move forward with that. Assuming we can get this prototype to the point where we feel that it is releasable, we'll put a deprecation warning in sodium, saying that in magnesium, we're going to pull Salt SSH out. We'll put a SEP together on what that pullout looks like. And then that will, again, I mean, the benefits there are that we have an independent project to talk about with Salt SSH. I cannot tell you how many people just have no idea that Salt SSH even exists. How many people who use Salt don't know that Salt SSH exists. That gives us a whole new, really, platform to talk about and express how we do agentless config management with Salt. And I missed the networking working group, but Wayne, you were telling me that it was the first run, and but I think it would make sense for us to be able to also look at this new project from a proxy perspective. So I'll try and keep that in mind. So I guess what I'm saying is, Megan and probably Wayne and Gareth, because you're a freaking genius, let me, I like your head nodding there. Yes, you're a genius. Let me sit down and try and come up with a modern async IO POP-enabled architecture for Salt SSH. Let me come back and kind of present a proposal around that so that and then work with you guys over, you know, over a short period of time in the next month or so to kind of flesh out where some of those liabilities would be. Because the goal of this would be, how do we make a system that is just so brain dead easy to use, right? And is also significantly faster and more robust than Salt SSH. And other SSH-based tools. You know, if we put something like that together, then we should be in a good spot. So give me some reactions. People tell me I'm being insane or not.
No, I think that sounds good. I guess my only concern is I know the reason we didn't decide to bring it out was because we wanted to wait till we were on at least 3.6. So when was I can't remember what release we were going to go to 3.6. I know Sodium is 3.4.
So Sodium is 3.4. This independent project would be based on 3.6 or 3.6 or higher.
Yeah.
And the thing is that even if Salt itself doesn't get to go to 3.6 for magnesium, which as we look at the landscape, that's looking a lot more plausible, right? I mean, 3.6 is shipping with RHEL 6 and 7 now, or it is soon. I don't remember the exact dates there. I was talking to Sousa, and they're looking at pushing 3.6 back down to SLES 12 because they've got customers that are pushing them for it. I feel like 3.6 is really the new Python 2.4. For those of you who've been around that long. And to deal with the fact that for years we just kind of based everything on 2.4. 3.6 is rapidly becoming that baseline that exists across all these different OSs. And so if we look at it from that perspective, then the standalone project can be in 3.6 whether Salt moves forward or not in the magnesium release, which would allow us to get that engineering moving while still maintaining that inline compatibility, right? Because we want to be able to do this stuff. We want to be able to do it without any rug pulling, or I should say minimum rug pulling. I'm sure that there's going to be some rug pulling, but minimal rug pulling. Thank you, Megan. Does anybody else have any reactions? Somebody tell me I'm crazy. I also think that this is an opportunity to breathe life into it in a completely different and new way, right? I mean, we're talking about a totally new brand. It's going to be called, you know, like Nanotube, and then a little logo at the bottom by SaltStack, right? But it's its own thing, which is really important. I also think that making it standalone and making it all POP enabled will allow us to start to look at a lot of the big next generation stuff that I want to start pushing out into the open, particularly things like Umbra. So again, for those of you not familiar with Umbra, it is it's SaltStack's new artificial intelligence platform, and we've already been able to start seeing some value in Umbra, although it's like a week old, right? So I mean, there's like 3 weeks, but still. Okay, let's see. Really, no other reactions? Wayne isn't throwing eggs at me. Chad is just quietly and thinking, I'm never coming to one of these things again because Tom has lost his mind.
No eggs. I'm excited for the whole pop stuff, and I also like the idea of getting, you know, I guess componentizing, you know, splitting some of SaltStack up a little bit more. I think having related / cohesive and yet separate pieces is going to be a really good way to go.
Okay, excellent.
100% agree. My only concerns right off the top of my head, I'm sure there's plenty, but that cohesive part that was just mentioned, just making sure that they don't clash, butt heads. I think that's going to be a huge, very big part of the project.
Yeah, no, and what I'm looking for, Chad, are concerns. So I really appreciate that. As much as I enjoy Wayne in this instance being a yes man, usually he's good at raising concerns. But yeah, making that cohesive is a big deal, and I do think that looking at this from a standalone project should also allow us to be able to integrate Salt as a whole, right? My hope is that it can stay cohesive in that this new system will still be completely compatible with how with Salt states, how Salt SSH works, and with the major feature sets of Salt like the mine and the peer system and some of those things that become real liabilities when we look at things from an SSH perspective. So yeah, that cohesiveness is important. The other thing I want to bring up, and again, that to try and emphasize how seriously I take this cohesiveness, this pop thing that I'm talking about, which again also is really, really new. I only finally got it out and released in the open a few weeks ago, and I'm working on getting version 6 out. It started at version 5. Long story, it's well documented. But one of the main goals here inside of this whole POP system I've been working on is to allow to have smaller separate code bases that are highly cohesive through interfaces which allow you to define. So I guess I'm trying to dive in here too quick, but when it comes to creating cohesive software, what you want to be able to do is make sure that the interfaces upon which your disparate software components communicate is well tested and enforced. And you want to make sure that the versioning of that well tested and enforced interface is solid, and that you can follow rules that make sure that your deprecation paths allow large gaps between your disparate components. Which again allows you to create that cohesion. The POP project has been, I called it an evolution of the Salt motor, but really it's a whole new programming approach to creating lots of small components that are highly cohesive and that can merge into larger applications. So one of the core premises of POP stands for plugin oriented programming. One of the core premises of POP is to create standard interfaces which allow for multiple applications to be merged in a really smooth and cohesive way. So that's a huge deal. And so moving forward from a Salt SSH perspective, we definitely want to be able to sit down and look at this and say, okay, we are following the standard and the standards of how configuration management works from a Salt perspective, and fully supporting that and fully supporting the functionality of Salt. But if we're able to support the functionality of Salt through a pluggable, abstractable way, then that also means that its extensibility goes up. So anyway, thanks for that, Chad. Sorry if my response is too verbose.
No, that was good. I just put it in chat there, but for sure I'm going to digest POP a little bit, take a look. I think that answers a lot of the concerns I would have. It sounds like that your answer is pretty forward thinking. My immediate concern is integration, and the POP project sounds like that's the idea. No, that's good. That really does answer my question, and I'll do some research on my own time here and take a look.
Very nice. Okay. I was going to say, one of the things that is kind of surprising me, I'm talking about prototyping this. I think I actually have the entire rest of the day. This never happens for me, to really focus and get this off the ground. So you all might actually see a nanotube repo, since that's the only name that's been proposed. Does anybody have any other name proposals? This is the hardest part of making new software, is naming it.
I feel like this could be a perfect opportunity for Salt Shaker.
For Shaker?
Yeah.
The logo could be a 1650s American Protestant Christian lying on the floor shaking violently. Is that what we're going for here?
That's one way to go.
Some really basic furniture, right?
I actually kind of like rocks.
Salt rocks.
Actually, I've never come up with a good name for this. I've never even considered a good name for it. Like, I almost want to just randomly pull a word out of like an old Studio Ghibli movie. We'll call it Totoro. See if anybody gets that reference. I mean, that's why I'm asking.
That's too common. You'll have to find something, you know, obscure, some like secondary character that they just interact with for a minute or two.
So you're saying I should call it Patsu after the boy in Castle in the Sky?
There you go. Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, name.
Something salt and transport related. Any kind of secure salt storage thing back when the Romans paid their soldiers with salt.
So do you know why they paid their soldiers with salt? Sorry, you opened up the...
I figured you might have some more knowledge about that than I do.
So, so for most of the history of Rome, they had a three metal coinage system. So you could have gold, silver, and bronze coins, right? And in the 3rd century, in 232, when the empire was really in a bad way, the emperor Severus Alexander was assassinated, and this led off a series of emperor assassinations and a massive valuing of the currency. And to my knowledge, the earliest recorded instance of hyperinflation. I could very easily be missing some hyperinflation instance that happened in, I mean, if I were to guess, I'm sure that, you know, there's probably hyperinflation during the Warring States period in China. But anyway, earliest that I know of, hyperinflation. And part of it was that the currency became so violently devalued that even the Roman government realized that they could no longer pay their soldiers in hard currency. And so they had to fall back on paying them in salt.
That's pretty fantastic. That sounds like the stories I heard. I can't remember if it was Venezuela or just Germany during World War II, when they like just started using currency as toilet paper because it was more valuable that way.
Yeah, you're talking about the hyperinflation of the Deutschmark.
Yeah.
Shortly after World War I. I'd have to look up the exact years. How about we call it Heiss?
Heiss?
HEIS as a shout out to Heisenberg.
Nice.
Okay. Do we have any other topics that we want to cover here now that I've given a history lecture and we've deviated that far? I
No,
apologize.
that was it. I was just going to give a summary. Pretty much the action items. Essentially, you're going to be creating this proof of concept. I'm going to follow up on the step to make sure that it gets merged in. And then I'll create some issues so that we can start assigning them out and tackling those issues. Yeah, I think, and then I'll write up the meeting notes from today and I'll post them in the SSH channel.
All right, that sounds good. The assuming I can get this off the ground, all popperized, etc. Then this will be interesting. But yeah, give me a couple weeks.
All right, great. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to bring up?
Any questions, comments, arguments, rebuttals? I love rebuttals. I rarely get them.
I don't have a rebuttal. And I'm not trying to be a yes man, but I share Wayne's sentiments. That I am excited to see where this goes. I think Salt SSH, like many things, is one of those things that's it's a very awesome component that not many people know about, and it's a good way to, it's a good introduction to using it in a good kind of painless way without having to set up like minions and masters and all that stuff. So I think making it easier will only benefit Salt in the long run. So I'm excited to see where this goes.
Okay, excellent.
Alrighty, I think we're done with that then. Thanks for joining everybody, and we'll talk to you next meeting.